Imagine a dark sea lashed by lightning on a stormy night, its waves crashing against rocky shores as foreign ships, laden with unknown warriors, drift ominously toward lands still slumbering. A distant rumble, perhaps the echo of a war horn or the thud of drums resonating from those decks, foretells a critical turning point. Amid these dramatic images, a haunting score, an unsettling blend of grave strings and muffled whispers, leads us into the heart of a millennial enigma, the story of the enigmatic Sea People, invaders who, much like an unleashed tempest, threw the ancient world's civilizations into turmoil, leaving behind only smoldering ruins and silent inscriptions. Welcome to a documentary where we lift the dense veil of history and cautiously slip into the Bronze Age, the era in which the political, cultural, and economic balance of great empires was shaken. The mighty kingdoms of Egypt, Anatolia, the Levant, or the islands of the Aegean Sea were forced to confront a threat that seemed to emerge from the undefined abyss of the horizon. Were the Sea People migrants seeking new homes, warriors driven by hunger and ambition, or perhaps a coalition of tribes united only by desperation and a thirst for conquest? Throughout this time, the roar of the storm resounds in the background, and the darkened sky reflects the tension of that historical moment. Ancient records, from the bas-reliefs of Egyptian temples to the clay tablets of the Hittites, unfold a partial story, sprinkled with questions and contradictions. Alarmed by their power, Egypt's great pharaohs assembled impressive armies, and frontier fortresses were reinforced, only to discover the menace could still arise from unexpected directions. Prepare to step into this realm of the unknown, where the crashing waves and the bustle of foreign troops create an atmosphere of both fear and fascination. Through this cinematic documentary, we will explore not only disasters and wartime victories, but also the essential questions. Who were these mysterious invaders, really? Where did they come from? And why have they remained for so many centuries, shrouded in an undeciphered aura? Stay with us on this captivating journey as we strive together to unravel the mystery of the Sea People, delving into the essence of the moment when entire civilizations were tested and history itself was rewritten under the blow of unseen enemies. We find ourselves in the late Bronze Age, roughly between the 13th and 12th centuries before Christ. Around the shores of the Mediterranean, great powers vied for supremacy while maintaining a fragile equilibrium of alliances and trade routes. Egypt had already attained immense prestige since the time of Ramses II, while Mycenaean civilization flourished on the Greek islands and coasts. Hatti, the Hittite Empire, spread across Anatolia, controlling strategic points for the trade of precious metals and grains. Major city-states in Canaan and the Levant thrived on commercial relationships, providing exotic products and refined crafts. Yet on the horizon, a dramatic change begins to manifest. Earthquakes, climate shifts, and possible food crises were already factors weakening political stability. Reports spoke of famine in certain regions and of rising social unrest. In this vulnerable setting, bands of warriors, some Egyptian chronicles generally refer to them as the Northern Peoples, launch a series of concerted attacks on coastal cities. Many of these groups came from areas still not definitively identified. Some theories suggest they might have formed a federation of tribes displaced by natural disasters or pressed by other migrating peoples. Of particular note, we find references to Sherdan, Shekelesh, Denyen, Peliset, and Weshesh, among other groups, in Ramses III's inscriptions at Medinet Habu. Egyptians depicted battle scenes in which such warriors, armed with curved swords and spears, wearing horned or feathered helmets, attacked by sea and by land. Clearly, before heading to the land of the Nile, these tribes had already ravaged various urban centers. In Mycenaean cities, one observes a sudden collapse of palace structures and the regal system. In Anatolia, the Hittite Empire appears to have disintegrated under the onslaught of these incursions, compounded by internal problems. Against this backdrop, the impact on society was immense. Priests and local rulers sought divine signs to explain the catastrophe. Sacrifices and protective rituals were performed. Temples became refuges, and fearful populations abandoned their settlements. The greatness of civilizations boasting centuries of history was shaken by an adversary as fearsome as it was invisible to historical sources. Thus began, slowly, the weaving of myths about their mysterious origins and the hidden motives behind these devastating raids. When historians and archaeologists seek today to understand the origin and composition of the Sea People, they encounter a deluge of ancient accounts, legends, and later reinterpretations that do not always match. In Egyptian chronicles, the attacks are described with exceptional drama, as though a supernatural force descended upon the civilized world. The bas-reliefs at Medinet Habu, temples dedicated to Ramses III, depict truly apocalyptic battle scenes. Ships filled with archers and infantry plunging into the waters of the Nile, while Egyptian defenders counter with torrents of arrows. The pharaoh is represented as the divinely chosen guardian, destined to hold back this barbarian tide arriving from the sea. Beyond Egyptian sources, various local myths attempted to explain the emergence of these tribes. Some say the culprits were sea gods who brought them forth from the depths to punish the arrogance of wealthy Near Eastern kingdoms. Others speak of exiled heroes, fighters who, like Odysseus and his companions, roamed the world in search of a new home. Certain specialists have drawn parallels between the Sea People and accounts of wandering Trojans, of Lycians, or even of hypothetical warriors from northern islands far beyond the Aegean Sea. In addition to legends, various metaphorical interpretations took shape. The Sea People were likened to storm demons, a sign that the age of great empires had ended and that a new era of uncertainty was dawning. Rituals tied to the fear of seaborne invasions included the purification of waters and the construction of altars on the shore, where priests offered sacrifices to calm the fury of the waves. In certain parts of the Levant, there remain to this day fishermen's tales of ancient ships haunting the coasts, an archaic echo of the traumas endured by past generations. Legendary creatures associated with these events also appear: sea serpents, witch sirens, or fish-faced deities, all attempting symbolically to explain the unknown threat. For some cultures, the Sea People were such a painful blow that it left a mark in the collective subconscious in the form of fables and warnings for future generations. Beware the unknown foe who may come from beyond the horizon. Thus, mythology perfectly conformed to historical trauma, intensifying the aura of mystery surrounding the identity of these invaders. Although the term Sea People conjures images of violence and disorder, there is another side to this phenomenon. Confronted by an unknown adversary, the civilizations affected were compelled to reevaluate their social, military, and economic structures. Paradoxically, the invasions prompted adaptations and innovations. In an ancient world where maritime trade was already crucial, defending ports and shipping routes became paramount. Coastal states began to build stronger fortifications, sturdier walls, and to organize war fleets that were faster and better coordinated. thereby enhancing knowledge of naval engineering and military tactics. Moreover, the crisis forced afflicted societies to rethink governance. For instance, the elite of Mycenaean palaces experienced a drastic decline, making way for more decentralized forms of organization. Over time, this contributed to the emergence of small kingdoms and city-states that would form the foundation of classical Greek civilization. In Egypt, resistance to the Sea People was transformed into a propagandistic success that reinforced the pharaoh's legitimacy. Ramses III, in particular, cultivated an image of himself as the sacred defender of the land of the Nile, which bolstered the state religion and the devotion of the masses. Similarly, crafts underwent significant transformations. Under the pressure of conflict, the need for more resilient weaponry and metal forging techniques intensified. Iron was becoming the new star material, gradually replacing bronze. Additionally, certain cultural exchanges were inevitable. The Sea People were not solely aggressors, but also carriers of traditions and objects specific to the areas from which they came. There is evidence that inhabitants of devastated regions adopted elements of clothing, ornaments, or even certain artistic motifs in sculptures and ceramics. Culturally, collective fear fueled artistic depictions of disasters and heroes. Frescoes and mural paintings began to feature scenes of maritime battles, while oral poetry took up themes of exodus, perilous navigation, and confrontation with unknown enemies. Thus, though the invasions brought about the fall of some great civilizations, they also contributed to the rise of others, serving as a catalyst for profound transformations. Rather than constituting merely a grim chapter, the incursions from the sea represented a bridge to new horizons, both culturally and politically, throughout the Mediterranean region. After centuries of research, specialists still fervently debate what happened to the Sea People and how these tribes managed to so swiftly destabilize power structures that had existed for hundreds of years. What is certain is that following the wave of invasions at the end of the Bronze Age, the Eastern Mediterranean world entered a transitional period that some historians call the collapse of the Bronze Age. Some researchers argue that the Sea People comprised multiple uprooted groups from southeastern Europe and Anatolia, migrating due to climate changes, famine, and internal conflicts. They may have formed a federation of convenience, sharing the common goal of finding new lands. According to this view, their persistence in naval attacks derived from desperation and the desire to survive. After pillaging and destroying numerous coastal cities, they absorbed local cultures, leading to a process of assimilation. Some are believed to have settled in Canaan, where, for example, the Philistines mentioned in biblical sources may trace their roots to the Sea People. Others in Cyprus or the land of Hatti. Simultaneously, earthquakes and natural disasters played a major role in weakening defensive structures and political cohesion. In an already fragile context, the final blow came from the Sea People's coordinated attacks, which ravaged populations already exhausted by famine and epidemics. Chronicles mentioning massive fires and plundered storehouses confirm that hunger was a formidable ally of the invaders. A starving city is much easier to subjugate. In the ensuing periods, many cultural elements can be diffusely traced to the civilizations that emerged from the ruins of the Old World. For instance, archaeologists have found evidence of a fusion of Mycenaean ceramic styles with local Levantine elements, suggesting that it was not merely destruction, but also new cultural syntheses. The evolving political and religious forms merged aspects of local traditions with practices originating from the migrating peoples, forging bridges to the Iron Ages yet to come. Regarding the lasting identity of the Sea People, theories diverge. Some claim they dispersed rapidly and disappeared as a single entity once the Great Raids ended. Others believe that nations such as the Philistines, mentioned in biblical texts, represent a direct legacy of some of these maritime tribes. Another hypothesis is that some members were integrated among Phoenician and Syrian populations, becoming merchants or mercenaries, while still preserving their reputation as experienced warriors. Hence, the question remains whether the Sea People were merely the spearhead of a broader systemic crisis, or if their shared identity, born of a momentary alliance, endured in another form, eventually turning into an essential piece of the historical puzzle around the Mediterranean. It is certain that the shock caused by these invaders redefined the known world, leaving deep marks in chronicles, artifacts, and not least, in the collective memory of subsequent generations. In the silence that settles after battle, only smoke rises slowly from the ruins. What was once a prosperous port has become a stretch of rubble where the echo of bare footsteps recalls the recent terror. Although the story of the Sea People begins with a dreadful assault on the known world, their end remains an enigmatic chapter, engulfed in the same twilight of history from which they emerged. They left behind fragments of narratives, bas-reliefs, and legends that continue to stir our imagination. It is fascinating to note how these tribes signaled a decisive moment, a threshold between epochs. Where Mycenaean palaces fell, classical Greek civilization gradually took shape. Where Egypt managed to defend its borders, the myth of pharaohs as divine representatives was further cemented. On the coasts of the Levant and in Anatolia, new cultural mixes created bridges to the Phoenician realm and the Neo-Hittite kingdoms, thus foreshadowing an ethnic and commercial mosaic that would influence later civilizations. The legacy of the Sea People is not limited to archaeological sites and poetic narratives. It lives on in the modern fascination for mystery. Books, films, conspiracy theories, and video games obsessively revisit the question, who were they really? Were they fishermen brought to their knees by fate, skilled navigators, fugitive mercenaries, or a multi-ethnic coalition bent on finding a new destiny, no matter how bloody the path? What does their story teach us about ourselves? Perhaps that, like our ancestors, we too are exposed to unimaginable forces, sudden changes in climate, power, or global balance. The fear of the invisible, the need for protection, and the hope for a better future recur cyclically in every society. The Sea People remain a symbol of chaos, unleashed by multiple factors, both natural and human, which can lead to dramatic reconfigurations. We thus end this journey with an invitation to reflection. Let us not forget how fragile human equilibrium can be in the face of the unknown. And when we look toward the marine horizon, let us remember that behind the waves, a force can arise at any moment to challenge our limits. Remain open to the idea that part of this mystery still awaits our unraveling, for the Sea People have shown us that no matter how we strive to comprehend the past, there always remain enigmas that defy logic and inspire us to explore further. On this uplifting note, we thank you for accompanying us through the discovery of one of the most unsettling and least understood pages of ancient history. May the desire to investigate, to ask questions, and to seek answers continue to guide you. For sometimes the mystery itself is the force that propels us forward, just as the sea's waves endlessly reach the shore, bearing the echo of forgotten legends.